Our next guest speaker, I'm very excited to announce. She is just a wonderful person in so many ways. Southwest Film Productions is one of our sponsors for the event tonight. The event could not happen without the CEO, Kat Sparks, who has been in the industry for a very long time. And she has been doing private consulting with writers for the Hallmark Channel, network television, BBC, Roundabout Theatre in New York. That's a big deal in the theater world. And university drama professors across the US. She is currently a director on 3 films. One was just filmed, and I had the pleasure to work with her on it, and 2 more are coming up for 2024. So Kat Sparks is on fire. Let me stop the share and welcome Kat Sparks. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, great. I really started out more in theater many years ago. And of course, I've been in film off and on. I lived in Los Angeles for many years. But I eventually became more of a theater director. I've been directing theater for probably 20 years. I've had 13 years in Austin with my own theater company, which was the Equity Union Theater. And then began to move more and more into film. And Jennifer, you've been such a huge help to me. I mean, you're the amazing person in the room, if you ask me, and that's been very helpful. So on top of all that, I do a lot of script consulting, mostly film, screenplays, sometimes short film, and sometimes television pilots, but primarily film. That's what I do the most. I really believe in the strength of the writer for every film.
Kat, in your opinion, what is the most important thing about filmmaking?
Well, for me, of course, it's going to be the script, but during the process, the cast and the crew, definitely the drivers of a really great film, but getting there requires a really great script. It's the sole catalyst for a film. It's the core reason for a film, and for that reason alone, it should be as solid as possible day one, and story and structure strive for excellence. If the script has significant weaknesses, everyone starts to weigh in, including the actors, and the outcome is just a different version of that weakness. It's not necessarily better. So getting your hands on a well-written, solid script makes the shoot easier. So as a filmmaker, I would just never settle for less than that.
So Kat, what makes a great script to you?
As far as craft, pacing. That's one thing I look for right away. The easiest way to improve your pacing is to cut back on action description, but pretty much all the descriptions as much as possible, so I can follow the pacing of the story and the relationship between the characters. But so far as the story itself, I would say a meaningful and very high story arc is key, regardless of if the story is character driven or plot driven. If we start way down here and then we're taken so far into the hero or protagonist challenge, that the transformation is amazing when we get to the end, or the failure is so devastating. That's a journey I think we all want to be on, or at least witness in front of our eyes. So that's what I would say.
We know a lot of people at Sundance are writers. What are some practical things that they can do to grow as a writer?
I get this question a lot. I think the easiest way is to obviously read a lot of scripts, including bad ones. We've all had to do that. That's not fun. It's a little painful, but you learn almost as much from that. And that way you get a sense of what works and what doesn't. The best way I know of, if you don't work for a studio or an agency, is to read for a festival. So commit to one full season, and it may not pay very much, if at all, but you learn a ton. And the only other way, really, and it's a good one, if you have the funds, is to get a writing coach, a script consultant for just one of your scripts, just one. It's all you need to do. And depending on who you hire or how far along your story is, the rates will vary a lot. But in my opinion, it's worth it. I've used them over the years myself, and it can cost anywhere from a few $100s to a couple of thousand, depending on if you're just at the concept pitch level or if you have a completed script. But it will help you in all of your scripts as you write going forward, if you do that at least once. So you can grow your skills by being a reader or hiring a script consultant. Those are the two.
Yeah, I always suggest getting a consultant with anything. I think I have 10 consultants for producing, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So, whatever you're doing, you can always use more consultants and mentors, in my opinion. I love this conversation I had with you the other day. What are your tips for getting rid of writer's block? We all get writer's block.
Well, in my own experience, I found that it usually happens, and even when I talk to other writers, it happens when you're hanging on to a scene or some specific dialogue or a twist that you're just in love with, but it really doesn't align with the hero's goal. But if you're really just in love with it, it's really hard to see that. It almost becomes its own story the more you fight it. So it may be clever, but it doesn't work. And I have a really hard time cutting it myself. So if I don't cut it, I waste a lot of time trying to weave it into the overall story, and it suffers for this one line or this scene or even a character. So I may even have to cut a character. And when I get blocked, it's because I haven't really looked at it objectively. So I'm resistant to cutting anything. I feel like I'm on a roll and then I stop. So there are two ways to fix it that I use all the time. And the first one, which I think is the best thing I could tell you as a writer, is every folder I have for my scripts, I keep an Excel spreadsheet open under each one of them, and I call it my next film. And if I see something isn't working, I take it out, I drop it into the spreadsheet and take a look at the script without it. And this keeps me from hanging on to something that I know is good, but it's just not good enough right here. I'm not actually losing the scene, and that gives me a sense of peace, and then I can move on. And the other thing I do if I'm really, really stuck is I just stop writing and I just heighten my awareness of others. So like I make a conscious decision to get out of the house and pay attention to everything and everyone in really specific detail. I hold on to conversations at the grocery store, the way people behave or dress. And if you work in an office, just keep a manila envelope in your desk drawer. And when you hear an interesting conversation or a line, just write a clue word. That's all I do is a clue word on a Post-it note. I stick it in an envelope, and that envelope gets bigger and bigger. And then I pull that out when I'm blocked. And then it triggers a scenario that might work, or a line or two. It'll help you with the story you're writing. And that's actually a pretty exciting moment when you're so blocked and then you pull something out and you go, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I was looking for. And it just works out. Those are the two things I would say that really do work for me.
That's such good advice. It reminds me of a famous quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said, I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I simply didn't have the time.
That's good. That's good.
Hey, my last question. What is your best piece of advice you can give to a writer?
There are two that stand out to me whenever I get this question. One, get rid of the flowery or novelish writing. It may please you, but it really does kill the pacing. So always write minimal descriptions. Go back over them and pare them down as much as you can until they get down to 1 or 2 lines, even less, a few words. Do that with action, character, all your descriptions. There's an art to writing succinctly, but it is what separates good scripts from great scripts. You can go through them quicker. The pacing just works. So, and second thing I would say is do a professional table reading of your script when it's at least 90% ready to film. And this is a very inexpensive way to prep your script for filming. And by professional, I mean use experienced actors. It doesn't have to be those you plan to cast, but find a neutral place like a conference room, not your home, if at all possible, and record it. There's way too much to say about this process right here, but if anyone wants to write to me directly, I'm happy to give them some tips on how to do that. It's something I do quite a bit. I work with a lot of original writers in theater. It's pretty much all I produce. I produce quite a few. And I always have readings and go back to the writer, and that's where we can find the tweaks that need to happen. So it's really important before you go to film.
Thank you so much, Kat. I feel like even if you're not a professional writer, you still have to write. You still have to write an email. You still have to write a resume. You still have to write a treatment and outline. You know, whatever, you're a DP, you still have to write to somebody. You know, it's good advice that anybody can take. So I love what you've said tonight. Be short, sweet, get to the point, be creative. That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I'm so happy to do this.